Good afternoon. My name is Michael Cadwell, and I am the director of the Knowlton School, and it is my great pleasure to welcome everyone. President Michael Drake, Mayor Andrew Ginther, and the citizens of the great city of Columbus, Ohio, including the students, faculty, and staff of The Ohio State University. Over the past month, 3 award-winning international design teams have reimagined the Olentangy River corridor as a public amenity that reinforces connections between the city and the university. The timing is fortuitous. Inasmuch as Columbus has transformed, so has landscape architecture, as it has become a key player in large-scale planning issues that address global warming, urbanization, and infrastructure. The discipline is well represented this afternoon. NBBJ has offices in Columbus as well as across the US and in Beijing, Hong Kong, London, Brunei, and Shanghai. NBBJ's recent projects range in scale from 2 outstanding Columbus branch libraries to the Bund, a 1.8 kilometer long boulevard along Shanghai's waterfront. Tom Leader of TLS Landscape Architecture is partnered with MKSK, the firm that, among other projects, brought us the Scioto Greenways and the Scioto Mile. Based in Berkeley, California, TLS recently won the international competition for the Sunlun Bund Ecological Park, converting 600 acres into green lungs to combat the effects of global warming. West 8 has offices in Rotterdam, New York, and Belgium, and is teamed with Realm, which has a combined 40 years of design experience creating public spaces that lead to thriving communities. West 8's multidisciplinary approach has led most recently to competition-winning entries for parks in Hong Kong, New York, Madrid, and Seoul, Korea. This extraordinary assembly of design talent could not have been gathered without the support of The Ohio State University and the Columbus Downtown Development Corporation, as well as the City of Columbus, Nationwide Realty, investors, the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, and the Columbus Partnership. I would also be remiss if I did not acknowledge that Knowlton students assisted design teams. The Knowlton School can be a design resource for the university and city, and I thank Keith Myers and Jay Casey of the Office of Administration and Planning for providing this remarkable opportunity. Of course, none of this would happen without the vision of leadership. And with this, I thank and introduce the president of The Ohio State University, Dr. Michael Drake.
Thank you, Michael. Great to see everyone, and I will make my remarks brief and things that we all know. First, we live in a great community, and it's a wonderful place to be. People are attracted to Columbus for a variety of reasons. We have a great university campus, and our university attracts people for a variety of reasons. There are many people who are in Columbus because they came to The Ohio State University and get connected that way. There are many people who are connected with The Ohio State University because they came to or are a part of Columbus, and so really our histories, our past, our future have been intertwined. Past has been intertwined for 150 years nearly now, and our futures are really intertwined as we look to move forward. A few months ago, last winter, we introduced our Framework 2.0, which talked about the university in the future, what The Ohio State University believes will be the course of its growth over the next 5, 10, 15 years as we prepare for being the best university we can be in the 21st century, and sort of we're doing the building, we're doing the built part of our environment that creates the platform for who we're going to be in 2030, 2040, 2050. And in thinking about that, there were a couple of things that come together. One is how people are going to move around, how we're going to go from one place to the other. The second is green space and how we're going to make sure that we have adequate green space and places that are good for people to be as they're doing their moving around. And third is the quality of the buildings that we put on the campus and how all those things link together. And as we looked at those, one of the things that is an interesting feature on our campus is the Olentangy, and how this looked like in some of our drawings or our approaches, kind of a barrier or an impediment. And we wanted to reimagine that, rethink of that space as really a high-quality water feature that helped to really enhance the quality of the enterprise, enhance the quality of the university, and particularly as we think about modern transportation and modern ways of moving people, as people move back and forth across the water feature, it opens the campus to larger useful space. And so that's something that we're thinking about a lot. We also know that this has been a part of Columbus, particularly downtown Columbus, and one of the things that I noticed when we first came to Columbus about 4 years ago was the redevelopment that was taking place downtown and how the river and the bridges formed a really important part of that. And then standing back and looking at those two together, the downtown Columbus and how the city is developing, the Ohio State University and how we're developing, and the water feature that connects us, is another thing for us to think about in the architectural design of Central Ohio for the next 10, 15, 20, 50 years, how we can make sure to make use of this to make it an attractive, beautiful part of the link between the campus and the downtown community. We see this happening on High Street, and we've seen the short north becoming the medium north, almost the long north, as it moves. I thought that was funny, but as it moves forward, and that's really something you can almost feel as you drive down High Street, and so we see that happening, and we think there could be a similar connection along the Olentangy, and that would be a wonderful thing to really kind of pull us all together in ways that let us connect. Great partners in many things that we're doing are important to make those things work. And among our most important and favorite partners are the city of Columbus. And really happy to have here tonight a special guest who's a native of Columbus, a product of Columbus City Schools, a very young person on the Columbus City Council a few years ago, and then as of 2 years ago, our mayor. And great to have a person of his generation looking forward to the middle of this century and thinking about what it all could be. And in fact, one of the things that was so nice is about a year and a half ago, we were designated through a national competition as the Smart City USA. And that Smart Cities designation, things that are happening with the university, with the business community, and with the city together to envision the smart city, fit directly into the way that we will have people moving around on campus, moving back and forth across the river, and then tying the river to a connection with downtown and the rest of the city. So it's a great vision that really includes all of us. It's great when having those visions to have a visionary partner, and it's my pleasure to introduce our friend and the mayor of Columbus, Andy Ginther. Andy?
Well, I think I'm in the right place. OH?
I-O.
OH?
I-O.
I am thrilled to be with you tonight. And President Drake, what an exciting time. Just coming through campus this evening on the way here, what a dynamic, exciting place to be, where the best and the brightest from around the world are calling Columbus home and making our community so special. So it's exciting for me to be here tonight, and I want to thank President Drake and BBJ, MKSK, West 8 Realm, our great partners, Guy Worley and the Columbus Downtown Development Corporation, Alex Fisher and the Columbus Partnership, William Murdoch and Morpsey, Brian Ellis and the NRI. As you all know, we are living in a pretty exciting, dynamic time of growth in Columbus. We have record low unemployment, a booming housing market, one of the fastest growing economies in the Midwest. We've also maintained a AAA bond rating from all three rating agencies, the only city our size in America to have such a rating. In addition, Columbus visitors add more than $6 billion to the local economy every year. The future of this community is very bright. Some experts say the population in the Columbus region will double in the next 20 to 30 years. So you think about it, we have grown very predictably and consistently since the 1950s, about 10% a year. We're going to grow that much in the next 20 to 30 years. Some communities around the country have not fared well with that type of dynamic and exciting rapid growth. Presents us with an incredible opportunity to go about it differently. We are becoming a premier destination for both business and leisure travel, corporate investment, entrepreneurship, and a thriving place for talented professionals. It presents us with challenges, or the way we view them here in Columbus, as great opportunities. How will we handle this incredible growth? People, in terms of infrastructure and development. And as we grow, how do we make sure that everyone, every family in every neighborhood, is able to share in the success story that is Columbus? Shared prosperity and an economy that works for everybody. It underscores the incredible need for mobility. As President Drake has mentioned, we believe mobility is the great equalizer of the 21st century. That regardless of where you live, if you have access to jobs, opportunity, education, high quality, affordable child care, position to improve your lives, that is the economy and the community that we're trying to build together. The answer is collaboration. And the university and the city and all of our great partners have a great track record, bright examples throughout this community of collaboration. We call it the Columbus Way because we believe we do public-private partnerships better here than anywhere in America. And you can just look at the university and the city's commitment to PAC, the Near East Side, the health sciences curriculum and programming and training, the early childhood pipeline helping us get more high-quality teachers in classrooms across this community, and of course, Smart Columbus, beating out 77 other great American cities to become America's first smart city because of the Ohio State University and the city's commitment and vision. The relationship between the city and Ohio State is absolutely critical as we think about the future development of the Olentangy corridor. We must work together to find the best growth solutions for this area. I am looking forward to this charrette process for an infusion of ideas from industry leaders, and the best and the brightest are Ohio State students who are helping to shape the future of this community. It is a great honor to be with you tonight and look forward to the process.
So I get to introduce the teams yet again. And the first folks that will be presenting are MBBJ.
Good afternoon. Great to be first. I wanted to thank Dr. Drake for doing part of my introduction today. Thank you. It shortens the afternoon a little bit for us. Mayor Ginther, thank you very much for being here. I also wanted to thank Guy Worley for not being angry at me today. This will all go very smoothly. Where's the clicker? Here we go. Before I start, one of the things that I thought was important, after a long school day for all of you up there and a long work day for all of you down here, level set and understand a mindset. For us, suspension of disbelief. A lot of what you're going to be looking at today are ideas that have a lot of barriers and impediments in front of them. In the 1900s, Fifth Avenue Easter Day Parade here on the left. Horse and buggy, not 10 years later, same picture, same Easter Day parade, internal combustion engines. Change comes fast and in a lot of different ways. So that suspension of disbelief is a vital part of, I think, the way that we need to look at this particular endeavor, not just for our submission, but my colleagues that will be presenting afterwards. For us, the idea of balance, connections and systems of the stuff that we need and the stuff that we want is super duper important. And I think it's a challenge because they are sometimes in conflict with each other. And we need to find ways to present solutions that allow us to be one Columbus in terms of the way that we look at all of these attributes that we have. We have a tremendous resource, as Dr. Drake mentioned earlier, but underutilized. How do we make it something that becomes important, not just as an amenity, but also as a connector? Can it be that it gets transformed? We don't know. We'll look at some ideas. It's easier for me to look at this. There are pluses and minuses to everything, and so let's go through some of them right now. I think our traffic capacity, yes, it can always be better, but the infrastructure that we have moves traffic in and out of the city in a fairly efficient way. We can argue that point all day, but better than most. There are river enhancements that are going on right now that are just great, and they need to continue, and I think all three schemes will deal with those aspects of it. There are anchor institutes, one of them right here, that are driving development in both the neighborhoods and in industry, and I think that is something that needs to be taken into consideration in any of these schemes. But there are also barriers. I know the dam is gone, but there are other barriers to the way that we look at this resource. And there are disengaged land uses. What do I mean by that? Well, a lot of what we have along the river is the back of something else. They need to start being the front of something, and I think that's an important aspect to it. This one's long. Imbalance between transportation and environment and community. Well, that balance is about how do we deal with the solution. Is it only a traffic solution? Is it a pedestrian solution? Is it a new transportation solution? Is it an open space solution? I think it's a lot of these. And right now, they are all there, but not working properly. So the future, big term, healthy cities. What do we mean by healthy cities? The idea of socially healthy, physically healthy, and economically healthy. I think those are principles and precepts that we all want to achieve. Perhaps an overused term, but an important one nonetheless, the idea of a smart city. For us, it's really about the notion of being connected, data-driven technologically. Whatever we do today, I think, is going to be enhanced by the way that everything is connected digitally. And efficiency, a bad word in many ways, but we all know that an efficient organization becomes important to us being able to lead better lives. Sustainability, of course, extraordinarily important. Any solution for this project, I believe, needs to deal with the notions of hydrology and how that can help the city, ecology, and the enduring nature of the project itself. It is not fly-by-night development. It is something that needs to be substantial. And the idea of community making is important as well, to gather, connect, and interact. These are basic principles, they're words, but we hope that in being able to kind of engage in this project, educational integration is a very important one. We have this tremendous resource here at The Ohio State University, and to learn, collaborate, and create together throughout the entire city becomes an important aspect. And civic anchoring, although we in our schemes, as you'll see here in a few seconds, did not necessarily get into the programming of some of these areas, it is important to note that it's not just about economic development, it's also about social and civic development, programs and buildings that allow for neighborhoods to be diverse in their activities and their uses, and that is an important aspect of anything that we do here as well. And I just said that. So one of the things that we started doing, I think I might be the only architect presenting here today, we're a little anal. We always start with an analysis, and in that analysis, we look at everything. You may have seen some boards outside. This is not a scheme, this is really just what's there. When you think about the city and all the systems, whether it's highway systems or green systems, the neighborhoods, you start really noticing that it is a complex, interconnected web of things that are happening. So what's the issue? What's the problem? What are the things that we need to look at? we dive into specific areas, and we will here in a few seconds, you start noticing that certain connections don't work as well as they could, and maybe we need to focus on those. Really focus. 315 is going to be a big topic of conversation. So to start off in a conceptual way, we are looking at basically 4 corridors that run north and south through our city. You're all familiar with them. There's no genius here. The Olentangy River, 315, River Road, and the tracks in many ways, even though that is not transportation. We know that around them there are great neighborhoods, and we know that they touch them in one way or the other, and we know that they impact them. We also know that there are great things that are starting to happen. The extension of Cannon Drive, for instance. And we think that that should continue, and it becomes part of the way that we look at things. Of course, as you extend, by the way, if we were over at Nationwide, it would be Brian Ellis Parkway, so don't get used to it. But it is important to know that there are starters already that one needs to take into consideration that allow us to be able to be more clear. Olentangy Boulevard, not River Road, perhaps, takes on more responsibility in terms of how traffic goes in and out, but it's not a service road. It really is something that allows for the community to engage with it. It is still moving a lot of traffic, though. And 315, maybe the farthest out there that we can get for our scheme is the redirection or moving of 315, straightening it out. Because what it does is that it starts giving us, opportunities for development. And again, don't think of it as development as developers swooping in and just putting stuff everywhere. We can decide what that development wants to be. But it does give us that opportunity, and basically our scheme is predicated on being able to do that. Now, north and south is cool. I think it all, we can make it all work better. But we also have this east-west. I think Dr. Drake touched on it, the connections between east and west. Very quick story. When I first got to Columbus 20 years ago, I live in Upper Arlington. I don't think that I went under 315 over to the east side for the first year and a half that I lived here. And partly my deficit, but I think also the barriers sometimes become overwhelming in terms of, now the city has grown and it's gotten better, but we're also proposing this idea of these very purposeful and very palpable greenways that perhaps are very different than greenways that you've seen in the past. These are not just parks. These are transportation greenways. These are places where people can recreate. These are places where people can ride their bikes to our new 315 corridor and go to work. So we're looking at the way that infrastructure works, I think, in an enhanced way. So conceptually, for us, we start off with looking at what's there, and not necessarily starting to draw, but in a way we start erasing. We start thinking about the things that are in the way, conceptually, and we take some liberties so that we can start looking at where those opportunities are and what those opportunities can give us in terms of development and ideas. Is it you? I think. You, okay, yeah, this is too complicated for them.
All right, so what a fantastic opportunity. This is so exciting to be able to talk about this stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take what AJ just talked about, and now we're looking at something that's a bit more real in terms of a map. And what you'll see with the white outline, the dashed outline up above, I'm going to look at this screen, is basically the area that we're really kind of studying. And within that, you'll see all those different corridors that AJ was talking about in their existing conditions. So the whole idea, of course, that's driving this is this connection between the university and downtown. But as we move forward and we start to unravel this, basically what we're doing, and the big thing that AJ just mentioned, is really we're erasing 315 as you know it right now. That's the big thing, okay? So what are we replacing with? Right away you kind of go, oh my gosh, how can we live without 315? Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So one of the first things we're talking about is this idea of this parkway that's on the east side. Again, Cannon Drive is already kind of a thread that's beginning there. But the idea is that how can that connect southward into the city, connecting potentially with Nationwide Boulevard and maybe some other streets at the south end, and also going up maybe even as far as East Broad to the north, or maybe even farther. And connecting with those neighborhoods, you see Clintonville, Old North, University District, Harrison West. There's a lot of neighborhoods right there that connect into that. The next thing we're talking about, as AJ mentioned in that conceptual drawing, is this idea that we reimagine Olentangy River Road and make it Olentangy Boulevard. And I'll show you in a bit what exactly that is dimensionally, but the idea is that it can handle much more traffic than the boulevard to the east side, which is actually going to be like maybe like a two-way road. This could maybe have 4 lanes to it and carry a significant amount of traffic. But not only that, but we would be looking at Northwest Parkway and 33 also. We're not traffic engineers, but what we're saying is there's going to be some need to look at some of these other corridors that also help support traffic in a bigger way than they are presently. And then the next thing, which is the real big thing, is thinking about 315. Again, not so much as it is today, but think of it as a multimodal corridor, a multimodal corridor. You see the white kind of dash line there, and then you see the little blue dots. Well, there could be lots of blue dots along there. There's one in Upper Arlington, one in 5th by Northwest area, and Grandview Heights, and Grandview Yard. So there's a number of those. And then also what we're proposing, if you look up here to, as we get into the city, is we're proposing that it loops through the city and comes back through again. So that it's actually a circuit is what we're showing. And then as we mentioned, thinking about the east and west corridors, both in terms of the natural corridors and also major streets such as North Broad, Ackerman Lane, and Goodell, and how can we reinforce those as not only great transportation streets, but also environments as well. And then the next piece then is, well, what happens when you start to take away? You basically put a bomb on 315, blew it away, and created these other corridors. What happens is there's opportunity, as we were talking about earlier. Opportunity for more open space, opportunity for a much better river environment, as we were talking about earlier, and also development sites that some of which are kind of there now, or some of which we're kind of suggesting something new for the current uses, but really a great deal. We're talking thousands of acres of land here, potentially, both all the way up and down the corridor. So this was a quick sketch we did. This would be if you were looking northward, and Ohio State's over here on the right-hand side, and let's just say that on the other side would be, well, let's just say it's Upper Arlington or something. This would be the transit corridor right here, the multimodal, that would connect into, well, actually this is train tracks. Multimodal will be here, which provides connection into new development. We have the Olentangy Boulevard, which again would carry a great deal of traffic. It would not be raised, there'd be no disconnect to the river, and then more development between that and the river, and then we have over here the Cannon Parkway, as we're talking about. So these are the basic components, and the idea is that we have uninterrupted connections, which we do not have presently. And then this would be a section looking southward. If you're thinking about Cannon Parkway, how that moves toward the city from the Ohio State University, this is the kind of feeling that would have. It would be a very kind of intimate scaled road, nicely shaded, plenty of biking, walkway paths and those kinds of things, and a beautiful connection to the river, seamless connection. As we move to the west side of the river, this would be potentially what the Olentangy Boulevard could look like. Again, multiple lanes, more open space, much more enjoyable walking and biking environment than we presently have. And so a much different environment than we have. And then this would be potentially what we could think of in terms of the multimodal corridor. And what we're thinking of here, of course, is something that's much more than just here we're showing this idea of bus rapid transit, could be electric buses or whatever, but we're also thinking about biking and hiking and all those kinds of things, and then imagining what kind of retail possibilities would happen. As soon as you put a transit center there, and then you're not that far from the river, it's going to be fantastic. So that's the kind of thing we're thinking about. So what I'm going to do real quickly here is just go through what we've decided to do is rather than try to take every potential development zone, we thought what we would do is just take maybe 3 of those and just kind of take a look at those a little bit and look primarily at the attributes of what we're thinking about conceptually. So these are just, again, this is just dreamy stuff. So the first thing we're looking at is the, I'd call it the chemical abstract site. So this is an area that is flanked on the west to the athletic campus. You see the shot back there in the corner, it's kind of faded out a little bit. But this is a river corridor that also touches Tuttle Park on the east side and so forth. But imagining what this could be as a new development that really takes more advantage of both the Ohio State connection and also the connection to the river. We'd like to look at existing city fabric. So we're looking at existing streets and saying, well, which of these streets, potentially residential streets, could come through and actually connect to the existing Olentangy River Road. And so that's what we're suggesting there, and also looking for ways that we could get better connections through pedestrian bridges and those kinds of things to connect across the river. And this would be something, again, these ideas are something that are not just localized to this area, but they could be imagined in other areas as well. We're also looking at just how buildings actually engage. Again, we saw a picture earlier on, I think it might have been the Kohl's site that was flashed up there, where you have a parking lot and then the river's like right behind you, but there's no engagement with the river. Well, we're looking at taking every one of these development sites and actually making sure that they engage with the river, both in terms of how they're oriented and also how they're programmed and how they're connected. And then this shows this idea, again, the Cannon Parkway on the left-hand side, but in terms of biking and hiking and those kinds of things, those other trails, they can gang together at certain areas and they can split off and do what they want to do. But the idea is that we create better connections. The second area we're going to look at is what we're calling, along the Olentangy Parkway, we're calling Olentangy West just for now. And there is development there presently, but again, if you take away 315, it feels much different than it does now. And so what we're showing here is an area that is actually flanked, again, by this very strong multimodal corridor, and also a newly imagined connection here, which will really be fantastic for the development that happens in between. So this is an aerial of that, and it shows potentially what could happen there. Again, a lot of emphasis on orientation to the river, but also taking advantage of the rapid transit or the multimodal. And imagine, this is where 315 is now, okay? Elevated, separating the two sides of the river. Again, we take that out of there, and it makes all the difference in the world, right? So then we have these ideas of connections. We have a railroad which is lifted up, and there's a structural base to it. We want to penetrate that more. We want to bring more connections through the city streets from Harrison West and on Grandview Yard. And also Grandview Yard will get to take advantage of this transit system as well. So it's not just the new development that takes advantage of the transit, it's also existing development that does. And then you can see here all the connections we have there. And then river edges, again, all the orientation is to the river. Imagine shops, restaurants, all kinds of things happening along here, connections to programmed events and elements along the river, that kind of thing. It's really a paradigm change. And then this is a sketch, again, of the transit center, what that could look like, providing connection to retail, both at a level 2, level 1, and then on the right-hand side, you'll see that, here we go. The red lines are what I was talking about earlier, where we would propose that we'd have more penetrations through. This would be Grandview Yard over here. This is Harrison West. This would be Battelle over here. So you see that we have these very strong east-west connections as well as the north-south. View looking southward of that same area. I think the thing here to note is just what kind of frontage you could have along the riverfront here. All activated, all connected, and as well, you're looking at a river corridor. Right now, there's great enhancements that have been done to the river corridor. Imagine if we get rid of 315. I mean, it's a game changer. It's big. And then the last one we're going to look at is Franklinton. And so in this case, again, what we're calling this is, we're imagining this is really the confluence. Now this is the confluence between the Olentangy and the Scioto. But this is also the confluence to where a lot of these new traffic corridors actually come into being. So this is a very important area. There's been a lot of planning that's been done. This is Mount Carmel, basically the Mount Carmel site. And we've taken some liberties with it. We've done a little work there ourselves, so we kind of know this area pretty well. But what we're suggesting is there needs to be more density to it. I mean, if you're going to...
We're going to tell Mount Carmel next week.
Yeah, we may be getting a phone call sooner than later, but we're imagining we need more density. In all these areas, we're talking about density, and that's what makes the whole thing work, is that when you have this kind of density, then of course transportation or mass transit happens better. The other thing I'll note here is that we're also talking about, the Hyperloop. You know, so we're imagining not only are we talking about the multimodal coming through and a new boulevard coming through, but Hyperloop could come right through there as well. Wouldn't that be exciting? So this is our vision plan. This is kind of the overview of what we've talked about. We're just wrapping up here. And the last thing I'll show you is, and I wish we had more time. I mean, there's only so much we can take on here in 25 minutes or this exercise, but we just barely touched on the river itself, and that's one of the great benefactors of this whole plan to erase and reimagine is what can that river corridor be? And some beautiful work has been done. MKSK has done a great job at the Scioto Mile and all this kind of stuff in the North Bank. Imagine more of that all the way up through Ohio State and beyond. So that's where we're going to kind of stop it right now, I believe. Yep. And thank you very much.
And next we have Tom Leader of TLS Landscape Architecture with Chris Herman and Jeff Pangonis of MKSK.
Good evening. I'm Tom Leader of TLS Landscape Architecture, and I'm here to introduce my team, MKSK, Jeff Pangonis, Chris Herman, and we'll go right to it. That's our nature here in this endeavor. And I'll hand it over to Jeff to really talk about the initial strategy.
Today, Olentangy River corridor is an outdated and outmoded road and river, an overlooked and unrealized relic of 20th century city building patterns. We propose a dynamic 21st century corridor from downtown to OSU and beyond, layered in connectivity, transportation, ecology, open space, cultural and neighborhood systems to further connect and amenitize the corridor in our city. One corridor, fully realized, fully functioning green infrastructure dedicated to stitching our city together east to west, north to south for work and play, open space respite, and ecological sustainability. The comprehensive implementation of oft-separated program elements whereby we maximize the marginal leftover space to lead us to vision for the Olentangy Parkway, moving beyond the individual components and towards the creation of a cherished regional parkway. For scale and context, some points of reference. Our corridor, as we've imagined it, is 5 miles in length, 1 mile wide. Inside this territory, from north to south, you find Franklinton, a new gateway to downtown Columbus, Gowdy Field, Grandview Yard, Ohio State University, Battelle, Ohio Health, Riverside Hospital, major institutions, incredible density, really exciting stuff. We're excited about the potential and the impact of this corridor just based on population alone, right? On any given day, this corridor has 23,000 residents, 59,000 students, 83,000 employees. We could impact 150,000 people on any given day just inside of our 5 square miles. So today we contend we're divided by river and road. Single modes that really keep us apart. Road and river, underperforming, non-communicating infrastructures that divide us rather than knitting our fabric together. We propose a new infrastructure that connects. One corridor, a system to move, enliven, inspire us, something to knit ourselves back together. Moving past a 20th century framework of different infrastructures and towards a 21st century framework, a braided, system-rich network that doesn't necessarily propose new streets or roads or even automobile trips, but rather a multimodal open space and mobility corridor. Building on the successes of our greenways and trail networks in Columbus, where we're already bringing people to the river, where we've just started to lure people from their cars, we believe this to be the next logical step in that trajectory and a healing public realm, connective tissue between east and west, north and south, between neighborhood, city, and university. Our focus is the human condition first. Through that lens, our effort is based on several primary systems. Ecology, open space, culture, neighborhoods, and finally transportation and mobility. Tom?
Thanks. So, why are we here? I know we're here because you folks want to connect the campus with the downtown. And I think we're here because of this. This is not a good way to facilitate that movement. It's not a positive experience. We had some questions that were put to us when we came here. One of them was, do you think this can be solved in landscape terms? Is this a landscape problem? But we think that it is. And we were also asked, another even more kind of constrained zone here, we were asked, is it really necessary to build roads, more highways and bridges? Is that really the progressive thing we need to do? And I think the answer is no, we don't need to do that. And we've taken the approach here also that we want to work with things just really the way they are. We would like to find a way to deliver a pedestrian bike connection with a full holistic ecological experience that can be done and delivered in 5 years. We would like to create a transit corridor that can be delivered in 10. And timing is important. Timing matters. People need to see a credential. They need to see stuff happening to believe in urban initiatives. And the more you do that, the more of these pieces you deliver incrementally, the more interest and resources really accrue to that effort. So back to our very simple problem here. We think that fundamentally the bike corridor and pedestrian corridor can be reworked and can be expanded in a way that it really does function just the way it needs to do through working with landscape. We need to work with the trees and the forest. We need to raise canopies. We need to create visibilities back and forth. We need to create ways of moving back and forth across the river more frequently. And as we do that, we need to create landform, working with earth and planting, to begin to braid these floats where you have the opportunity to involve people in for example, these perched wetlands, things like that. Let people get right next to them. Let's let the people move in a braided movement, just the way you expect water to do, involve them together. And even to bigger and larger scales as we get to larger open spaces within the campus. And we need, because it's a narrow corridor and because it's constrained, and because we're going to deal with it the way it is right now, we're going to need to have some engineering techniques with walls or with raising part pieces onto boardwalks, use much more of bridges in order to get the full value of the corridor. And we need to imagine using the space under the highway, at least in the interim, as something that's got positive nature. It can flow from one side to the other, and there's visibility back and forth. And the connections across the river. We are proposing a whole series of connections, and they need to have personalities. They need to have stories. They need to have names that can be associated as a place that you met your girlfriend for the first time, or you crashed your knee into the side of whatever it was. Things that have a very specific, idiosyncratic nature through design and innovation in creative terms that will make it a place you remember. Even to that point. Could be Ohio State red. And finally, as we develop this system, we need to develop simple but effective park renovations that are addressed by all of the places this system really goes. So this is the network we're talking about now. And it begins with a Scioto waterfront that MKSK so well put together and got people out of their cars, got them out at the river. Both of these things super critical. And that's why, again, why we're here, because that works so well. How can we create that kind of connection, that level of amenity all the way up to the campus? So let's keep people on the ground, let's keep people on the bikes, and find a way to bring them through. The first place we'd like to propose an intervention is really at the confluence of the Scioto River and Olentangy River. This is an important place. This is where you transition from an open urban place with lawns and concrete and things that are really speak of the downtown. You go through a threshold right here to two river systems, not just one. And it really needs to work for both. And it needs to mark a point where now we are entering a realm that is more forested, more ecological, working within natural systems very clearly. So we would propose this sort of a crossing, which is not a hard thing to do. and it sets up a piece of park that faces the public, and it also creates a place behind for a signature development, not just anything. This ought to be some important museum or somebody's collection or an important moment in the city right here as you move through. And then moving north from here, we get into a corridor where we need to manage carefully trees. And it's not a simple matter about trees. There's a lot of volunteer stuff and things just happen. We need to actively manage and design landscape spaces based on planting and soil moisture, and the annual flooding of the river, so that this is an experience that in the most fundamental way, the landscape is beautiful. So our idea is we need to grow a great forest and a beautiful forest. And so it needs to be managed and grown to the point where we don't like that highway, but we think we can swallow it up. And we think we can create a corridor that is spanned and swallowed up by a great riparian forest. And as we go along, we want to double the capacity of the network. So we got trails really on both sides. It's going to be interesting and require a lot of special interventions to go be on both sides and to bridge back and forth. So we got braided flows moving along. We are trying to use the space of the river itself as the place where you can be. You're not on the side of it all the time. You are in, looking down, having visibility in places you didn't have before. It's a key concept. And we need to get people down close to the water, close to the ecological elements. And we need to create, these are become a little more generic based on your, high street dresses and things, but there's a whole family of new construction and identity that can come out of these things. But this is this experience you ought to be able to have, fundamentally right there. Let's focus on how to create those kinds of experiences. And let's make each of them have a special personality. And let's exist with what's there, and let anywhere we've got extra space, whether it's under the highway or either side, let's take the advantage to involve it through a kind of a braided movement using what is actually there at the moment, the space that's there. Now there's a couple, when you get to more to the central camp, there are a couple things that I think are key to highlighting this new river corridor, and one is the idea of creating a new connection from the oval out to the river. And the second is, can we create a hub when we get there? So here you've gone on had a great experience getting up there, and then where do you go? Where do you land? What's the place where you might get from bike to shuttle, or bike to walking, or anything else? Where are you going to meet people? Where can you have a party? We think the edge of the river is the place for that. So what we're proposing is a hub that is nothing like the current student center, but does retain a new structure, a piece of special architecture that welcomes people coming from school out to the river and people arriving from downstream or upstream. Here's Ohio State's front door on the river. You are here, you can come to the party, please. And in that way, we would look at actually connecting all the way across to the Midwest campus with another special bridge. And you don't have to do that part, but you really got to do the first part. You need to connect back to the oval and readjust what is the front door on the campus. It's going to be the river, at least part of it. So this is a plan showing the connection back to the oval. This is something that can be simply done without destroying the program that's there of recreation fields that are well loved, without having to worry about those towers. I mean, it'd be great if they were gone. It'd be great if the highway was gone, but we're trying to work. And I would love to see all that stuff gone, but we're just trying to solve a simpler problem, a 5-year problem, a 10-year problem here. So we can envelop those in forest. We can create a plaza between them that is a welcome space for people that are then moving across Cannon in a safe way to the student center and the amphitheater, and then crossing over to the Midwest campus to a new space, which really needs to be the arrival point there. And this is going to set up connections for the future. And the way that whole thing is organized, it needs to have a big, important front door almost at the level of the oval. And this is how we see that. It's not a big, huge interruption, but it's important. And it's more like a linear park, a place to be, hang out, meet your friends, raised a little bit so you can overlook recreation and so forth. But this is bringing you out to the beacon of the student center, pulling you back into the center of the campus. And the amphitheater itself could be green. We would like to see land sculpting, which is part of the strategy all the way along this whole corridor, used to house great activity and merging with the kind of ecological nature of the riverfront down below. Moving north, there are many areas, the OSU wetlands and the areas to the south, which we ought to look at as kind of a reserve, open space reserve, where we can develop much more elaborate profiles in terms of river edge treatments, meadows, wet meadows, perched wetlands. So there's quite a much larger potential mission even than you're seeing currently at OSU wetlands. Let's make that live. Let's have identity, places to go, things to get excited about in terms of ecological performance and function related to water. And there are simple problems we can solve. That dam, it'd be great if it was gone, there are a lot of utilities inside. We could just do this and let people at least cascade down the front of that thing. Then we could do that, next summer. And finally, the main point of all this is we've got to find ways to integrate and rather than separate, like many of us are observing, landscape and circulation, and then also urban systems that need to come into the same mix in a complex way. Let me hand it to Chris.
So, improving connectivity is a fundamental component of the Olentangy Parkway. Today, the Olentangy corridor connectivity for vehicles and transit breaks down in two places. One, at Kinnear Road between Ohio State and the Lenox Town Center, and two, at Twin Rivers Drive, Dublin Road, and Souder Avenue. In fact, the last route is so circuitous that most residents don't even think about it's possible to get from Olentangy River Road to Spring and Long Streets in downtown, or even to Broad Street in Franklinton. If we can improve these connections, we can transform this corridor. Today, Souder Avenue extends north from Broad Street and terminates at Dublin Road. Meanwhile, Twin Rivers Drive bends east, never connecting with the confluence area. This is one of the areas we need to concentrate on. By extending Olentangy River Road south over a portion of Twin Rivers Drive and threading under I-670, we can make a connection with a realigned Souder Avenue. This provides a direct connection along the Desire Path to Dublin Road, Spring and Long Streets, and into downtown, and further south to Broad Street, the Mount Carmel site, which was already referenced, and Franklinton, opportunity neighborhoods, important for the city. South of Ohio State's Midwest campus, Olentangy River Road was broken by the construction of State Route 315. In addition, Kinnear Road and John Herrick Drive do not align. This hinders all sorts of connectivity and separates neighborhoods and commercial centers from the campus and West Campus and SciTech from main campus. Again, this clean north-south movement by repairing this intersection interchange along Olentangy River Road needs to be reestablished, and Kinnear Road extended across the Olentangy River to better connect OSU's West Campus and main campus and the Wexner Medical Center and neighborhoods to the west. This creates an attractive set of complete streets that both parallel and connect to the realigned Cannon Drive. So we envision and propose a 21st century multimodal corridor that extends from Broad Street, or even further south, Town and Rich Street, all the way north to North Broadway and even on to Bethel Road. This corridor will provide for all modes of ground transportation and serves as a spine that connects neighborhoods, districts, and institutions along its extents, as well as sparking new and growing mixed-use nodes. This corridor would provide for microbus and shuttle routes in addition to transit along the Olentangy River Road spine. I'm going to show you a little bit more of that here in a minute. It would connect employment centers, students and faculty, institutions in the downtown. And it's kind of alluded to here, but the idea is this is a spine, and you could have micro shuttles doing loops throughout this, connecting different employment centers that are divided currently by State Route 315 on this corridor. It's important to note that we are using existing corridors better to provide more capacity rather than trying to force new roads through existing neighborhoods or districts or widening or relocating State Route 315. We're trying to do something that we think is more achievable. We are proposing that a transitway be integrated into the Olentangy River corridor, this new extended north-south corridor. It would likely start as a dedicated bus rapid transit and autonomous shuttle stretch, but could at some point possibly be converted into a light rail corridor. In lieu of placing transit on the active CSX freight line, this is a concept that we looked into. It's impractical for a whole number of reasons. We propose that it really be part of this Olentangy River Road corridor. So, we know that the Olentangy River Road is a very complicated beast, has many different conditions, but we have looked extensively at the right-of-way along this stretch that we've talked about, and we believe that it is possible to make this happen. We have illustrated 4 different typologies that generally describe different conditions that we can find along Olentangy River Road. This is the urbanized condition. You could imagine this occurring in North Franklinton or near Kinnear Road, and shows how, with this kind of complete street system and with this transit, we can, and the improved Olentangy River Road and braided trails along it, that we can see increased mixed-use development and really anchor these specific points. Critical component of this design is capturing our Smart Cities, Smart Columbus initiative. Not only would the center lanes be reserved for transit, they'll be reserved for autonomous and connected shuttles. So again, looking at this, the centerpiece is a center running transit lane where COTA could run dedicated buses today or bus rapid transit soon in the future. This also could be for autonomous vehicles, autonomous connected vehicles, shuttles that could carry people on short trips using this as a spine to get from point A to point B or along the entire corridor. And then you can see we've got in the blue dedicated cycle tracks for bicycles running through the environment, wonderful street trees, streetscape, sidewalks that we all know how to do so well here in Columbus. And then the reimagined Olentangy River Road corridor, again, with the Parkway. And then where development happens, we do got to be very careful to preserve these passageways into the park, because again, the park is this big amenity and attraction for these nodes of development. This is another typology. This is the typology that we would see in areas around Goodale. So this is where State Route 315 starts really kind of interfering with the whole corridor, and it's at ground plane level. So here we've got to look at some other interventions Tom talked about. This is where we try to find some connectivity through either raised bridges for pedestrians and bikes, or maybe even tunnels. I think the bridge is probably the right way to go. But you can start as, again, connectivity along the river, but eventually we need to think about how to get them across into these, to this reimagined Goodale Parkway. This is the one that everyone imagines. This is what we all think of when we're both on 315 or running along next to it. It's the elevated section of 315 where we run it across the river and run it kind of through our really attractive parkland. But the point we want to make here, again, is that it is possible to make a great connection, a green connection, a parkway connection between Goodale and the Olentangy River. And again, to pull the trail connectivity through here and create a great mixed-use development on the west side of Olentangy River Road, and parkland starts then on the east side and integrates all the way across to the other side where Battelle is, where Ohio State and Cannon Drive are. It's possible. And again, here you see, again, center running transit, and you can see the bike, dedicated cycle track moves then to the east side. I guess the other thing I should mention here, and Tom hit on it, you know, a big part of this effort is reforesting the edges along 315. So we're really trying to hide it. For the people that are on the ground, the people that are experiencing our city, you see a forest, and you see woods, and you see underneath it. People on 315 get to look at the tops of trees as they go through, a nice tree canopy, so in the woods. But again, we're going to try to make it go away, but we're not taking it down because it does serve a vital role to our city. And then this is the fourth typology. This is at Ohio State. This is where we have a number of parking lots. Of course, those are important, but we imagine this could be transformed into more of the recreational fields, serving both sides of campus. Again, connectivity between the West Campus, the Midwest Campus, the main campus, and again, having some development, having the center running transit. This is again where the autonomous shuttles, the cabs, buses could be using the center lane to getting from one side to the other, but using Olentangy River Road as a spine. So, in summary, what we're trying to propose today are initiatives that we think are doable in the next 10 years, things that are visionary but achievable. And we think there's probably 4 or 5 key pieces to this that we've kind of already covered. So the first one is we need to complete the greenways and blueways. CDC and the city have done a fantastic job downtown. Really wonderful transformation along the downtown river, and it allowed us to all imagine what that can look like. Ohio State has done a fantastic job reimagining what Olentangy River looks like by campus. Now we have some gaps. We have the gap between campus and downtown. We have kind of a gap going north. We really have, as MBBJ mentioned earlier, all the development kind of north of Kinnear turns its back on the river. We don't take advantage of it. We need to be thinking about that. So as any new development occurs, it really needs to be addressing and thinking about these things, and incorporating this braided two-sided pass system. Like the other piece to mention, we touched on it, is we know that while the Olentangy bike trail is loved, it is so heavily used now, particularly in sections. And as we do this, it will get even more heavily used. That is another key reason to have the trail on both sides and have the bridges across. We want different loops so people can go different directions and not have the same experience going down and back, but also so people in neighborhoods can do small loops, can walk their dogs, can take their kids on small circuits and have a different experience, but also we can have much more capacity along the river as we should, and really embrace this fantastic amenity. I also want to say the blueways. There's been this vision put forth as part of the downtown plan to talk about how do we connect downtown all the way up eventually to High Banks Metro Park. And part of the impediment are these low-head dams. And as Tom showed you, we think there are strategies that can be done to make them safer for crossing. So people on canoes and kayaks or even in rafts can make it across these safely. And we can do that without having to relocate them, which is a big, big cost. So trying to do these small incremental improvements really achieves this blueway vision along the Olentangy River. 2, we think there's some critical pulse points of park development that if we create these, they will help link and create those nodes along the trail system and incentivize this mixed-use development and provide the amenities that the neighborhoods and districts can really benefit from. The other piece of this is these are in places where things are proposed or happening. So the bottom one is the confluence site. I think this is a really interesting idea because as the Greenway was done, as the city and CDC achieved the Greenways, it's actually impacted further up the stream, made it much more natural, but this is a chance to start taking advantage of the confluence site where the lease is coming due. So the city is going to be facing decisions about how do we reimagine this area at the confluence and take advantage of this anchor point at the north end of downtown and the connective tissue point between up north on Olentangy to the Ohio State University, and even along the side of the river up through Upper Arlington, through the Columbus neighborhoods, the Hilltop, and on up to Dublin. In the middle, we know as part of the Framework 2.0 plan that Ohio State is rethinking what do we do with the Drake Union? What do we do along this campus? We got other big initiatives, Cannon Drive's happening, we know that, but it's going to extend further. This is a chance to really think about how to anchor that point. So again, something that could happen in the near term, the 10-year term. And then the top is talking about, look, we have developers that own ground just south of 315 along Olentangy. We know Ohio Health is investing in their new corporate headquarters. We need to be thinking right now, as this land starts to redevelop, how to take advantage of the Olentangy south and north Broadway. And so that's that top one. I already mentioned this, but just to hit on this again, we do have 2 heavy lifts, but we think they're critical to realizing this vision of the Olentangy River Road Parkway, and that's the Olentangy-Kinnear Road realignment, rebuilding that interchange, and extending Olentangy and connecting through to Souder as part of the 670 interchange near the confluence site. And then the last big piece, hit it, but I want to hit it one more time. We think as smart cities looks at how to roll out all this great technology and efforts that are being developed here in Columbus by so many partners, that this is a chance to create a corridor where we can really show real time and real life how to create these autonomous and connected vehicle technologies, how to use them in a transit capacity, sharing with CODA, again, connecting our institutions, employment centers, Ohio State, using this center lane. And it'll be a great way to prove and show off all that we've come up with. Lastly, creates this one corridor for investment, and Tom's going to finish up with the final thoughts.
There's 2 important things here, and this is the thinking we're trying to bring to the table. One, shouldn't we get on a critical path? Don't we need to identify when we need these things to come online? What's going to be the benefit over time, waiting sooner or later? Second, in creating what's here, you don't have to take out the highway necessarily right now, but you could in the future. What we'd hope to see is that you don't need the highway ever. Maybe there's another way to develop this kind of system that we can call our options together, we can do things faster and quicker, and then maybe that will go away. In 20 years, we don't even know what we're going to be circulating on anymore. But I think that's our key idea for you tonight. Thanks for listening.
And finally, this evening, we have Claire Agree from West 8 and Brian Bernstein from REL.
Thank you very much. I just first wanted to start by thanking the Ohio State University, President Drake and Mayor Ginter for hosting us and letting us get to know Columbus, Ohio a little bit. Our Rotterdam office is probably asleep, but if you're not, hello. I think we're live streaming, and Sarah and Gio and Maya back in the New York office, who produced almost all of this tremendous work with Mariel, a graduate right here in the second row. I hope we do you proud. Brian from Realm has been, and his team have been supporting us on the work here, and I think it's there's a lot to get through, so I'll just get to it. We are a landscape architect-led team. We really believe that landscape can give identity to cities, and I think that's something that's tremendously important for Columbus. You know how much Columbus is changing and how special it is, but there's not a strong vision outside of Columbus of what it is, and as landscape architects, we really want to bring that. This little jaunty guy is from the 1908 plan, and he envisioned an opportunity for a magnificent approach to the university. He's looking a little grumpy, and this is an old idea, but a wonderful idea. The idea that a river corridor could unite and bring pleasure and recreation and also solve problems. So this is a century-old idea, and one that now the Ohio State University is really taking on in a very powerful way, to have the Olentangy be the central space and the heart of the campus.
So this is Wendy's in downtown, the original Wendy's, and Columbus has always had this entrepreneurial spirit and in some ways been identified by this demographic that was the test market for the rest of the country. We've spurred a lot of great companies because of that ideal, and Columbus is growing today because of that foundational quality. But Columbus is really changing. We're looking at 1 million people over the next 30 to 40 years, and how we begin to rethink that our downtowns and our public spaces is going to become really important. It's even further changing the idea that we're becoming smarter, younger, more diverse, more educated, and competing with cities both nationally and internationally. When you think about the Smart City Initiative and what it's doing to put Columbus on the world map, we really do reinforce that test market idea of innovation and sort of a lab of how we begin to rethink this amazing canvas that we have today that for a long time has been largely automobile dominated. As you can see, we've given a lot of priority to the pedestrian, or to the car, excuse me, but not really to the pedestrian. Even in some of our most sacred spaces today, our tailgating is really auto-centric. And so as the world begins to think about how autonomous vehicles and mobility can begin to reshape how we think about parking lots, that's really the way we've started to think about, does the American dream change today? The one man, the one woman, the 2, 3 automobiles begin to think about how we reuse space that we have today, particularly against the river that largely looks like parking lots today becomes very pedestrian dominant in the future.
So we've taken on a lot. We've really kind of reframed the entire river, thought a lot about culture, thought very far afield, maybe a generation out, to think about how mobility, transportation, development, density can really make this green heart at the Olentangy. Fundamentally, we're trying to really solve a problem, which is connecting the 2 main job centers in Columbus, which is downtown and the university, and make that linkage work. And to do that, we think we need to actually step further out and reframe a mobility loop within the entire, much larger than just those 2 nodes. There was a time not too long ago when Columbus, like a lot of other cities, took great civic pride in their transportation, great beauty, great romance. And there's many cities in the country and in the world where this is sort of the billboard for who they are. I mean, who hasn't just fallen in love going on the St. Charles streetcar? What will the 21st century mobility network for Columbus be? You're leading the way in what mobility, autonomous vehicles, and all these systems are going to look like. What will the landscape identity of them be? That's something we're very interested in. But at the same time, we don't want to forget that we're still just human beings, and we want to move on our own steam in the fresh air on our bikes. So we want to make sure that we're creating kind of the greatest network for pedestrians and cyclists in the world. It gives you great joy, it makes you feel good, it brings health, it brings well-being. So our team has really tried to solve a lot of problems related to vehicles and mobility and transportation, but want to keep it back to the human scale as much as we can. That's still me, sorry. If we do that, we can really unlock the thing, which is, what is this 800-acre space? Now that if we can solve the transportation problems, we can give it a real identity again. I think this is still me. Sorry, we messed up. So this has already happened once, the kind of reclamation of amazing amount of green space downtown through the removal of the dams and reclaiming of the riverfront, and we can do it again in the upper reaches of the Olentangy. We think there's something on the order of about 850 acres that could be made available as public space in this study area. What is it going to be? Does it have a sort of scenic river quality? This is a really important question. We started to kind of take some cues from the upper reaches of the river so that it would have a very different identity from downtown, but a much more kind of scenic and pastoral kind of space. So this is where we are. This is our master plan, and you can look at it a little more closely in the boards, but we're looking at about 850 acres of green space within this loop.
So we'll talk a little bit about the bigger mobility, the way we approached it, and Claire will focus a little bit more on the landscape portion as we solve that. As Claire indicated, we have this, what we call sort of spaghetti city to a degree, and particularly if you look down at the confluence today that 315 and 670 come across, and that Olentangy River Road is a very difficult connection to make it over to Franklinton. This is at the confluence at the boathouse today, and there's probably a large amount of people in Columbus who don't even know that exists, and it's probably one of the best views of Columbus. So in our concept of trying to think about mobility, we thought about it as a larger loop. How do you think about Olentangy River Road and High Street and then Broad Street and potentially Lane or Ackerman as a way to think about this as a larger connector? And when we do that, we start to think about mobility hubs. It's not ironic that Ohio State is one of the largest employment centers, as well as downtown. And so when we start to think about 315, perhaps it stays in place, but do we begin to think about it as a mobility hub? If you think about autonomous vehicles and still having that individualized vehicle, instead of bringing people into campus today, do we use the Lenox site, redevelop it, make the mobility hub the actual connector, and start to think about more interesting ways to connect across to the medical center, bringing that amount of people into the campus? Furthermore, we could not neglect to think about that Columbus is one of the finalists for the Hyperloop competition, as we've mentioned earlier. Thinking about that on the south end and talking about how we bring Olentangy River Road all the way down, perhaps we begin to align it with 315 under the confluence there. For a very brief moment, they become one, and they come together at this mobility hub where the Hyperloop might come across east-west. Not only does that have the implications of great connectivity, it has great connectivity for a neighborhood, and a neighborhood that is really looking for some change happening. Today, farther on the east, we have East Franklinton and we have West Franklinton, but what if we just had Franklinton that was brought together by some future innovation of all these mobility things coming together? And so as you look quickly, the opportunity is really great because 315 sits below the grade today of Franklinton. You have the opportunity to bring the Olentangy River Parkway up against that at grade, and then the Hyperloop above that, so the opportunity for a real big mobility center.
Just to show an example of how this could work, this is our central station in Rotterdam, which is where tram, high-speed rail, Uber, taxi, everything comes together. But what's really special about this project that we did is that it puts the greatest priority on the bicycle, being Dutch, of course. It is completely escalators for bicycles, tunnels for bicycles, ramps for bicycles, parking for bicycles. And so if this is really the heart of your incredible cycling corridor, this is something that needs to find its way into both of those mobility hubs.
We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about, once we've solved for the idea of mobility and how we get people there, the obvious next thing is if you build it, they will come. And as Claire will talk about in a minute, as we build the Greenway, the logical thing is that the density becomes up against that and how we provide access to that. Obviously, the neighborhoods that surround this have the greatest opportunity to become a part of this new identity, this new district that is connected by the loop and becomes those, while somewhat unique neighborhoods, all connected by the Greenway. We've done this before. We've built the park and then we've built the density around it, and that's essentially what we're proposing today. But now, as the opportunity, if we think about the loop and a new district, how do we think about the architecture? Is this an opportunity to think new and innovatively about architecture and new typologies and a new aesthetic? So part of that is definitely within that thinking. To go back to a second about the corridors and the typologies, it would be remiss if we didn't address 315 and talking about vehicles, but also talking about bicycles. As Claire mentioned, the mobility hub for bikes. How about a project? This is a project being proposed in Miami, Florida, for a high-speed bicycle lane. If you're a bike rider and you're trying to move, riding along a path against somebody who's walking is very difficult. So thinking in those terms. About Olentangy River Road, we've been here before where we thought about Olentangy River Road as a parkway. This is not Olentangy River Road in the old, but how do we think about shifting that priority from all car dominated to a bit between pedestrian and cars, and then using trees as that canopy to connect it. So this is Olentangy River Road today, 4 lanes, a lot of vehicle domination. How do we begin to rethink that and thinking about all those modes of mobility as Chris so eloquently mentioned as well. And then we'd be again, as High Street is part of our loop, how do we think about High Street? We're already thinking about that today in the short north and in re-envisioning that. We've been here before with the streetcars. We have the width to start thinking about those different modes of transportation. If you think about the fact that you have an Uber and have 25 other people who have an Uber trying to go to the same spot, how do we pull off and think about getting out of your car and having all those waiting zones? So in addition to the mass transit solutions, thinking about those individual car solutions and how that can balance for creating space for the pedestrian, which we ultimately are and are trying to create those spaces.
Finally, the last real connection on mobility is really on the pedestrian scale, which we're calling the laneways. There's this wonderful kind of set of fingers, which are the ravines that come in and meet the Olentangy across. And we'd like to take advantage of these to make some smaller scale interventions that are not car focused. Carmine is desperate to walk his daughter in her stroller down this road to the river, but he can't. And so we want to really think of all of these connections as being the kind of easy way that you access the river from your neighborhood. They can be very bike-oriented, they can be very green, very designed, but it's fundamentally a kind of a different scale of city. So something that's not about the vehicle at all, it's really about the pedestrian, and you can really snake these through. Today, a lot of these neighborhoods do have access almost to the river, but then they sort of end. In the future, we really want to give them all the gateways. Every single neighborhood that has its back ending at the river, we'd like to give a gateway so that they have access onto the river, and that's good for real estate as well. So this whole loop, this whole mobility, using existing networks in different ways, bringing more trees, bringing more landscape, it changes this fundamentally, where you have these sort of buckets of use, a suburban model, a world for private vehicles, a river corridor with a path, and the university into something that's totally linked together all the way across. It's one green system and network that's completely baked together. And that allows us to have fun and start to design what some of these green spaces are. So since we're landscape architects, we decided to take a closer look at 3 of them in what this green heart, green river could be. Everybody loves Gerardo's image of Buffalo Bayou under the freeways. He's not here. But this idea that all of these could snake all over the place is sort of the picking up point. We want to make the greatest bikeway in the world. My Dutch colleagues would be irritated if we didn't achieve that. That's really important. That it needs to work and it needs to be beautiful. And then it's going to link together these 3 different zones. So I'll start with the sandbar. Back in the good old 1908 plan, this little cow on the confluence says this would be a good playground site. We agree? This is what it looks like today. We really like the kind of dynamism of the river here, that the sandbar moves and changes and you can get down to the water. You have great views. But then we wanted to kind of bring in some other materials and some other experiences. the amazing geology of this area. I haven't been here yet, but Mariel brought these images to us. Like, these are spectacular spaces. So could we bring some of the kind of material and experience of refuge, prospect, to some of these parks along the Olentangy Greenway? So we've started to kind of create a much more wild aesthetic in this green heart of the Olentangy than what we see downtown to differentiate it. This is a look at the Olentangy, the confluence today. We've reimagined that as a major development site, a real destination. Quick look at some of the different components. We imagine density and development coming on either side of it. We have the multimodal corridor just to the south, basically linking Franklinton as one neighborhood. This amazing new landscape of kind of rock and sand and beach. And then we have a bar of cultural village here and another cultural village here on the other end, stitched together by this amazing bikeway that links it all together. This is the light factory, which we know there's some different plans in the works for that, and the idea that this becomes kind of a cultural village, amazing kind of artisan maker place, and people really love that kind of thing. Everyone likes tacos. We have tacos, restaurants, bars, shakes. They could be very flexible, but we sort of like this sort of under the freeway kind of like cool little village where you get that view that Brian mentioned before. And this could be a great place just to hang out as well for free. So as we back out from that, we'll go over to the other side. This is a look at what the light factory looks like today. This is one of these, Columbus has all this amazing masonry and brick, and so people really are drawn to this, and so you could imagine a whole complementary development coming around this. That's the interior, kind of fuzzy. So this is a no-brainer. This will happen, I think, for sure at this site. The next site that we wanted to look at is what we call the Wexner Waterfront. On one side, this is the parking lot by the Target. I think the highest and best use of this in the next generation will not be a parking lot, so we'd like to reimagine that. And then on the other side, the Cannon Drive realignment. So already things are changing in this area of Columbus. This plan here, we show development coming a lot tighter than it is today. So those parking lots go away in a future where we don't need parking lots. And the park on the other side, in front of the medical center, we've also added a little band of development here. So here we are on the west side, that Target parking lot. In the future, you could imagine an amazing 3 to 5 story mixed-use development taking you right to the river. And on the other side, this is pre-Cannon realignment. Cannon Drive is right here, and we're suggesting maybe you even develop a little bit of that park. You basically make one of the most incredible waterfront villages right in front of the medical center. If I were a medical student, I would want to live there, and I think it could be a really great, really activate that park. The last is, since we're at Ohio State, Buckeye Beach. We've been told students really want a beach at Ohio State. Here they are. And maybe it doesn't have to look like Malibu. It could look like Ohio. This is an old image of the way the river used to meander and kind of move around. We could go back to that, but there's a stadium right here in the way. So we're not going to do that, but we did think maybe it's kind of an interesting idea to play with the river a little bit and think about how we can bring the river closer to some of the institutions that we have. So of course it's moved away from the boathouse. Could we bring it back? So this area, Buckeye Beach, we've messed with the river a little bit so that we can basically deposit all the sediment right in front of the stadium, and then we've given a kind of prominent new axis connecting the stadium and St. John Arena for Keith, because he has a lot of good memories there and wants to keep it. But I do think this sort of kind of making a very important civic crossing right here at the stadium is really important, and then giving a place where students can really access the river in a prominent way is important. So here's what it looks like now. In the future, it gets even bigger, it gets wider. We have kind of an urban area next to the stadium, and then the beach just beyond. Yeah, there we go. The blimp is a thing that happens, I'm told. Yes? Okay. The last kind of topic is what is a tailgate if you don't have a car, if you don't have a parking lot? I think there's other ways to think about what the culture is and what the kind of gathering identity is at Ohio State. Maybe it's something like this. Maybe it's something like this. But perhaps the tailgate doesn't need to be in a parking lot in the future. Maybe you rethink this so that for the 358 days a year when there's not a football game, it has a really wonderful different identity. So here we are at Woody Hayes, the parking lot today. In the future, it becomes kind of an amazing green grove, maybe even an arboretum. stitching together. And this crossing of woody haze, this is where the river really connects into campus and the campus connects over the river. So we connect these two parts of the world together. This is just another example of a project that did this. Rather than all these landscapes staying in their lanes, they really start to intersect and cross and meet, and that's really important. This is just a look at the Woody Hayes Bridge, adding ornaments, adding placemaking, adding gateways, making sure that it works from a transit point of view, but also could be closed for game days and be kind of an amazing plaza for partying, which is what college is all about. I think just in closing, we just wanted to say, I think every city has the opportunity to really brand itself through landscape, and Columbus is definitely primed for that. We think great cities have memorable landscapes that tie to their culture, and Columbus is in that really interesting moment where the culture is being redefined and is very dynamic through its great investment in innovation. So with that, I thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Jay Casey. I am the Senior Vice President for most of the services that go on around campus and at Ohio State. I just want to take this last moment to say thank you again to our teams, NBBJ, Tom Leader and MKSK, West 8, and Realm. They came here thinking that this was going to be a competition, and what it became was a great collaboration amongst themselves and also with many of our students. So we want to thank you for that. I want to thank the mayor for being here. This is the kind of place that, Columbus is the kind of place that we look at these kind of things and we don't say, wow, we say, yeah, we can do that. And I think for the students in the room, not in the distant future, you'll be able to say, I was there when that started. I see it, and I was there on the night that we first started talking about that. For our sponsors, Columbus Downtown Development, Guy Worley has been one of the brain cells to get this started, so thank you, Guy. The City of Columbus is with us. The Columbus Partnership has been helpful to us, as has Nationwide Realty and Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. And finally, the Knowlton School. Mike, thank you for being a great partner to us. Thank you, Mike. You put this all together with us. And finally, I want to say that this started because Dr. Drake grabbed Keith and I one afternoon some months ago and said, why don't we pull the downtown and the campus together? The two greatest things about Ohio, about Columbus, should be coming together and should be laced together, and there's so much potential between the great people there and the great people here. And so that's where this kernel started and got planted, and from there, great things will come. So thank you for being here. If you RSVP'd, there's going to be a reception afterwards down on the first floor, and you have to sign in as you go. So thank you, and join us if you can. Thanks to our groups. Thank you for being here.